cost of living is going up and the chance of living is certainly going down. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is, can Sri Lanka afford another tariff hike as far as electricity is concerned? Can businesses afford it? Can the people be sure that they will be competitive in the world market as far as export businesses are concerned, who are bringing the dollars to the country at this very moment of time? To discuss all this and more, we've invited four guests to our studios this evening as well. Joining us this evening on the show are Johan Lawrence, Secretary General of the Joint Apparel Association Forum; Vidur Ralapanava, energy expert. He also holds a doctorate. We are also joined by Nimal De Silva, energy expert, as well as Parakrama Jayasinghe, former president of the Bioenergy Association of Sri Lanka. Tonight on Face the Nation, we have three journalists in the studios as usual. Joining us this evening on the show are Shania Dadigama, onto my immediate right; onto my immediate left is Sharon Benedict, and onto my far left is Sandro. And thank you very much, Sandro, for joining us. First time on Face the Nation.
Yes, Sharon.
Looking forward to having you grilled our four panelists today on the show. Let's get the ball rolling today with Johan Lawrence, Secretary General of the Joint Apparel Association Forum. What are your thoughts on this subject?
Thank you, and thank you for asking us. I think the key, so we represent the apparel export sector, essentially textiles and garments, and a sector that is a vital part of the economy. Earlier this year, we had a significant price hike. In fact, it turned out for a lot of factories to be well over 80–90%. And this is in the backdrop of, we had the discussions with PCUSL, we were part of the public submissions, and we argued at the time that yes, an increase was due, but not of the magnitude. And finally, we had a very high price hike, which in dollar terms made Sri Lanka on par with countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam, who are in the same business, selling garments to the same customers. So right now, in dollar terms, we are on a competitive level, and it's obviously essential that we need to remain competitive if we want business to remain and if we want business to grow. So if we then have another price hike, which more than anything takes us beyond a level that is competitive in the region, then we are only going to restrict our future growth, because when an investor is wanting to come into the country, one of the key things he will look at is the cost of power. And if the cost of power is higher than a competitor nation, then his investment choice will be to go elsewhere. So for us, we see this as a big problem, because it will erode our competitiveness and obviously then also have an impact on the economy and the dollars we bring in.
Johan, very quickly before I move on to Vidura, exports are down by, as far as apparels are concerned, by around 25% at this very moment of time. Would this also have an effect going forward as far as the energy hikes are concerned?
Absolutely, because right now we are seeing a drop in demand, and that's essentially due to external factors, due to recessions, due to inflation, due to the Ukraine war, etc. And whilst this is a global phenomenon, what we are seeing is that even today, as in this market, prices is the key, and countries like Bangladesh are able to take market share away from us. So if you look at even over these last few months, countries like Bangladesh are growing in their share into places like the EU, and we are losing out. So even right now we are losing out, and that is purely because in this market where there's more suppliers than there is demand, price is key, and the buyer will move to where the price is most competitive.
Thank you very much, Johan Lawrence, Secretary General of the Joint Apparel Association Forum. I now move my attention to Dr. Vidur Ralapanava, energy expert. Vidur?
Sure. Thank you, Johan, for bringing the context of apparel industry. So we've been hearing about this tariff hike. I think Minister shared some of the numbers in social media. And what struck me as interesting was that based on the numbers that was shared, CEB is going to be at least a 850 billion rupee company by 2023. To put that number in context, that's about $2.4 billion. The largest company in Sri Lanka is MS Holdings, which is about CEB is going to be 2.4 billion, MS is around 2.2 billion. So CEB has essentially become the highest revenue earning, if the tariff increase goes through as they are talking about it, earning company sans the same corporate governance, financial guidelines and audit processes that is in there. So out of the 850, about 750 billion is on their power procurement, which has never been, historically has never been audited. So that's the kind of organization that we're doing. And the reason I'm saying that is because there is a lack of rigor when it comes to pricing, which we will go into when we're having the conversation. Why are we having this problem? It's very, very straightforward. We have ample renewable energy potential in this country, which has been systematically blocked throughout the past decade or so by the utility, and that lack of renewables is the reason that is driving up the price. How do we get out of it? There is no short-term way out, but medium-term way out is actually to build more renewables. Now the problem that I see is that we've seen the crisis from beginning of the year, from about April when the fossil fuel prices have gone up. Has there been any substantial shift to procure renewables at scale to arrest the problem? The answer is no. Has there been any substantial movement to add simple things like rooftop solar, which can come up in the grid in 4 months? No. In fact, some of the work that was done by the CEB and the government is actually forcing people to not adopt rooftop solar. So we have a problem. We understand why it is happening, but we have not really spoken about how we are going to solve the problem, and we are just trying to solve the problem by passing the total cost that CEB claims they want to straight down to the consumer, which will have a extreme problems in the economy, as Johan pointed out, but also because people are not going to be able to afford it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vidura Ralapanava, energy expert. When you spoke, Vidura, there are a lot of questions that are lingering on my mind at the moment, but I'll leave that when the second round starts off. I want to now focus my attention on Mimal De Silva, energy expert.
Good evening, Shamir. I think I get this horrible feeling that power industry in Sri Lanka could be doomed at least for next 4 years. Also, there may be a real danger. One company will have the power sector monopoly, and that particular company might be having a turnover for next 5 years over $7,000 million.
One company?
Yeah, $7,000 million. So I think this problem revolves around this number. And this didn't start yesterday or today. This started some time ago. I think in your network, one of the programs, we discussed this in September, I think last September, 2021, in one of the program. This is this LNG. So why I'm saying this? At the moment, say hypothetically, we think that our power requirement peak is 2,400 megawatt, right? Then we have hydro. We have gone to hydro maximum. There's no new hydro farms. We don't have. So there's 2 under construction, that is Umaue and Moragas Power. But apart from those 2, we have about 1,400 megawatt from hydro. And say if non-conventional renewable energy, say 1,200 megawatt. So if we say plant factor 50%, with those 2 we can get about 1,200 megawatt. Then we go for coal. We have a 900, and we say 50%, we get 450. Then there are plants. CEB been preparing for LNG for some time, and they have already got one West Coast, that is 300 megawatts, and there's one is coming up, so Badanavi 300. There's another tender, this already closed, and it is in with somebody in the CEB, and there, so that is comes to 1,000 megawatt.
Right.
And there are calendar this The power plant's 433 megawatts ready for natural gas. So therefore, natural gas ready for 1,433.
Okay.
So therefore, the total amount, right, if we take 50% of that, so that we can match this 2,400. So let me tell you something else also.
Yeah, I'll get back to you, Mr. De Silva, in a bit because I'm giving equal opportunity to each speaker in the range of 2 minutes and 2.5 minutes. I
Okay.
don't want to do an injustice to the other speakers, so I'll come back to you
Okay.
momentarily with regard to the points that you're raising right now. I'll give you an opportunity for sure to talk about all that. Let me now move my attention to Mr. Parakrama Jayasinghe, a former president of the Bioenergy Association of Sri Lanka.
Well, thank you for having us, and if not the situation was not so bad, I would have enjoyed joining you and discussing this. But we are in a very, very serious situation which nobody seems to want to accept. You see, we predicted this going to happen beginning of the year, when we had some chance of doing some remedial, actually, not totally, but some means of trying to avert what is happening. Because when the oil prices start going up to start with, and then the coal price went through the roof, nobody took any attention to see, we are so dependent on fossil fuel. So what is that going to mean to us in rupees and cents to start with, coupled with the dollar going up? So that is the time we said, for God's sake, get on with something that we can afford and something we can do in the short term, particularly riding on the success we have had, particularly with rooftop solar. You see, thank God for some means by which it was allowed to go on, whereas all other renewables were blocked from 2016 onwards. No renewable energy projects were allowed to proceed by, again, we'll come to that one, by somebody's opinion, you see, which was picked up by CEB and blocked all renewable projects. But fortunately, because of the Surya Bala Sangrame, solar could carry on, and during that time we came up to something like 460 megawatts of rooftop solar. So that's the time we said, no, this is the only way out, because we know already coal and oil is totally unaffordable, both in rupee terms as well as lack of dollars. So, but then of course nobody wanted to take necessary action on that. I'm trying to look at, very, very, what shall I say, lopsided way of looking at things. So that's why it forced me to write articles saying CB needs to learn arithmetic before we talk about electrical engineering. Simple answer. Now, the only answer to all the problems is, okay, we have a cost, but we earn so only half of that one, therefore jack the price up. Irrespective of why that cost is it a reasonable cost? Isn't there any way out of that one? You see, that question was never answered, however much we tried. So, and Vidura mentioned that, they are predicting a cost of 800 billion with this price.
850 billion.
850 billion. Sometime back, there was some publication which said, okay, 728 billion, assuming this increase in demand, right? Now, CEB have always been fond of saying that electricity demand is coupled to the GDP. And everybody knows how GDP is taken nosedive. So therefore, there can't be any chance of a increase in demand. Therefore, the cost has to be based on what is realistic, what can be expected.
What people can afford at the end of the day.
Yeah, that will happen. Also, the thing is, why do you work out a cost assuming a demand which is not going to happen, and say, therefore, you have to increase it? But if you do the same calculation with UCSL did, saying what is a reasonable demand, then what is the cost?
Mr. Jayasinghe, I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Because as far as the first round is concerned, as I said to Mr. De Silva, I need to give equal opportunity to each speaker during their opening remarks. You can also send us your messages or questions to 076 656 5353. I would love to take these questions as the show goes along. So as I said before, on to my immediate right is Shania, immediate left is Shalan, far left is Sandro. Because Sandro is doing the show for the first time, let's start off the show with Sandro. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Amir. I'd like to pose an open question because we at Face the Nation must bring out what the people need heard first. So my first question is, now these power cuts now we saw today making headlines was the fact that there may be 10-hour power cuts, but then the minister says that it may not be the case. So my first question is what the people are actively wanting to hear. Will there be 10-hour power cuts? Will this increase, or will these power cuts reduce? What can the people hear? Because I know the opening remarks were very economical, but for the people to hear, do you think this will get better by the first week of January?
So
or will they expect?
let me direct that question to Vidura. Vidura,
Yes,
10
actually.
hours of power cuts.
I don't see why we need to have 10 hours of power cuts as it stands now. Definitely not in January, because we have enough water in our reservoirs. We have been getting some coal, and there are more coal ships are coming.
But I think CEB engineers said by March, 10 hours by March. So
It's subjective.
Covered.
So, I mean, I understand CEB engineers are saying a lot of things, and what I request, not just to you, but journalists in general, is somebody is making this type of a statement, ask them to give a detailed working on how this is done. On what basis, what are the assumptions underneath this? And I will explain to you why it is. The only question we have is that, now typically in a year, we bring down 38 ships of coal.
36.
36, 38, so different. It depends, right? So let's even say 36. Number is normally 38 to 40 because 2.4 million is what they buy. And we only have a 6 months window to unload this because of the monsoon. So we start unloading from October, middle of October to middle of April. So the question is, how many ships of coal can we get for this season? We have already passed 2.5 months and we have only been able to bring down 5. Okay, so we have to bring down the balance, whatever that number is during that period. So depending on how much we are able to bring down, that will determine whether we will have longer power cuts or not. 10 hours I think is a
overstatement.
Overstatement. It appears to be more of a scare tactic than anything else.
So you're saying the people shouldn't be afraid?
So there is a risk of power cuts, but I don't see a risk of 10-hour power cuts.
But Vidura, we were a nation that went through 13 hours of power cuts at one point. Let's not forget about that. So when the government minister who's in charge is saying that we may experience power cuts starting March for 10 hours, that sends jitters down the spine of anyone.
It's not the minister who's saying. That statement is made by, I think, Nihal Veeraratna, I think is his name. He's the president of...
No, the minister in charge said this in Parliament.
If you don't
He said that in the event prices are not increased, we will have to go for longer power cuts.
So it's not the price increase that is the problem, right? And let me be very clear. Why were we unable to buy more than 5 ships of coal in the last 2.5 months? It's not because we don't have rupees, it's because we don't have dollars. We have to pay same reason why we can't buy as much of oil that we want, because we simply don't have dollars. So we shouldn't confuse a rupee issue with a dollar issue. So let's say we increase the tariff, even to the amount that the minister and whoever that's saying is saying we want. That is not going to give us dollars. How do you import coal using rupees? How do you import oil using rupees?
But isn't this a tactic? No, isn't this a tactic, Vidura, to ensure the losses that are incurred by the CEB is reversed? And probably this is a restructuring plan in the months ahead. Probably they want to sell the CEB. For that, they have to make sure the CEB has to make a profit first. The balance sheet has to be good. The P&L has to be good.
So if you read the reform report and studied what the reform agenda is saying, what they are talking about is taking the outstanding debt of the CEB and putting it into SPV that is managed separately. When the restructuring and unbundling, and I'm using the word unbundling because what is happening first is there's a process of unbundling and there's a process of corporatization. Now these separate units that are coming up has to be financially independent. So there are two things that has to happen. One is their costs have to be covered in tariff. right? So you have to have, because you can't start a new entity, whether it's privatized or not is a separate issue. The issue has to have a going concern, because unlike in the past, there is no opportunity for subsidy, right? But the tariff increase is only going to give CEB rupees.
Okay. So, Mr. De Silva, very interestingly, in your opening remarks, you said something that really caught my attention. You said that there is a company that is trying to make $7,000 million through private power purchasers. Now, when you look at the numbers, let's look at the numbers that we were talking about before. Vidura said 850 billion rupees is the revenue that the government is expecting for the entire after the price increase, right? So if you look at the numbers, if you take the current exchange rate to play, that comes to approximately $2.4 billion US dollars. Now you're talking about $7 billion US dollars. Now that's a big number.
No,
who's trying to rob the people?
No, I said next 5 years.
Next 5 years.
Next 5 years.
Even 5 years?
Okay,
That's a big number.
Let me give you the facts.
Yeah.
Right?
No, but first of all, tell me who's this company?
No. I'll come to
No,
that.
yeah, okay. Let's talk about your
I'll come
mechanics
to
and
that.
how you have come to that
Give me a
conclusion.
chance. Give me a chance to explain.
Yeah.
Right. Now, CEB has a long-term plan for generation. So you take next 5 years. I got this from one of their reports for next 20 years, and they say they're going to expand LNG 5,650 megawatts, right? And the renewable addition will be 7,614 for the next 20 years. But there won't be any major hydros, because hydros are already done, right? There's only two more to be added. That is only 155 megawatts. So the renewable additions is including solar, wind, mini hydros, biomass, battery, and pump station, all those things. But you take the 5 years from today, from 2022 to 2028, right? 23 to 28, the LNG is going to be 2,000 megawatts, and the coal, maybe another 300 they will add to this 900, and that will be 1,200. After that, there are no coal in this.
No, but this one, let's be a little bit practical now. Now there is an LNG power plant that's going to come up. When is the completion due?
No, the LNG power plants are ready, but they are working on diesel or heavy fuel.
Yeah, but even to buy LNG, there's a cost.
No, wait a minute, I'll explain.
Yeah.
Now we already signed a contract with NFE, New Fortress Energy, right? We sold 40% shares to that West Coast, to that company. That agreement was signed in last September, right? 2021 September, right? That is still valid. That's a secret. Now the last month, the president, who is the finance minister, the LNG deal was signed by the finance minister that time. It was Mr. Basil Rajapaksa. Now he's back in the country, right? Wait a minute. Let me explain. Now the president is the finance minister. Now he started negotiating with NFE. He said that. It was in the newspaper last month, right? So they are negotiating behind, secret negotiation. They don't have to tell us. So now what happened? When they signed the LNG deal.
No. Let's say your theory is all right. Tell me who is the company who is trying to siphon off $7,000 million of public's money in the next 5 years.
I think Mr. Vidura had a comment on this. I think he was trying to.
No, but let's first of all hear what. Tell me the company, and then I'll move to the.
No. Whoever company comes.
No, but you mentioned that there's one company.
The NFE already signed.
So this is a New Fortress company.
Yeah,
Energy.
Right.
So they will make $7,000 million.
No, wait a minute. If they come in 2024, itself there's 1,433 megawatts. Right? Power plants already
Right.
ready.
No, so, no, Mr. De Silva, we are wasting time on this subject. So, is it New Fortress Energy that is trying to make $7,000 million?
No, not they are trying to make. They will get it.
They will get it. Okay, now,
They will get it.
what are your thoughts?
I just want to do a simple clarification. First of all, the generation numbers, what you have mentioned, is not accurate because I have the generation plan which was released in October 2022. There is no coal plants. There's a national policy says that you cannot have any more coal plants, so another 300 coal plants is not going to come. It's not even in the generation plan. I don't know who gave it to you. I can show you. The generation plan is with me right now. Second, what was signed with New Fortress Energy is a MOU. 40% of share transfer has not happened. It's just a MOU. Beyond that, so it may be true what you're saying, that they are negotiating, but 40% share is not there. There is no contract. So we have to be accurate in terms of how we are describing issues. MOU is not a contract.
No, but to be very fair, Mr. De Silva can have his own opinion with regard to the subject.
You can have opinion so long as opinion is not
So we have a question from one of our viewers to
that
Johan.
MOU is in public domain.
Johan, the devaluation of the 86% of the rupee has a significant buffer to cover the electricity costs for companies like who are in the apparel sector. So actually, it's small companies that are going to really be affected by the tariff hike, not the larger companies. What do you have to say about that?
So both will be affected. Smaller companies are already affected.
Yeah.
So even right now with the downturn in economic activity, the first companies to feel the impacts of that are the SME companies, because a lot of them operate where they act as subcontractors to the bigger companies. And when there isn't work, then immediately they stop. So that's absolutely correct. The fact of the matter is energy is a significant part of our costs, whether you're a small or a large company. And if even if you're a large company, if your energy cost in dollar terms is uncompetitive, you're going to be uncompetitive on price. You're going to lose market share. You're not going to have the orders to pass to subcontractors, and smaller companies will be the first to see the hit. This is the unfortunate situation whenever there is a crisis, is that it is the SME factories who are always first hit and always hit the worst, because they have very little option in terms of they rely on other companies for work, so they can't just suddenly start selling to find a buyer. They can't, they're generally borrowed very
And Mr.
heavily.
Lawrence, supposing the hike is implemented, what is the contingency plan of the sector, of the apparel sector?
We won't have a contingency plan, because right now companies have moved heavily to generating their own power through rooftop solar and so on. The one piece that we're hanging on to at the moment is something called power wheeling. And this is something which we have been lobbying for some time, and we believe will come in with the amendments to the Electricity Act, which moves away from this single user concept, whereby a company, put it in very layman's terms, a company who has a factory in an area that is, say, not overly blessed with sunlight, can set up a solar farm in another part of the country and then take that power, which is then used through the CB transmission. You pay the CB for transmission, and you consume your own power. Now, this is two impacts that it will do. One is it will allow companies to be protected against future hikes, because they are then generating their own power. But secondly, that's going to take out of the load that is available. Now, the reason we're talking about these high tariffs is because of the cost of thermal that's coming in. So the more we can take out of the grid requirement, the less reliant you are on thermal, and thermal is the most expensive, so therefore you will also see the benefit. So right now, the only thing that we have to hang a hope on is that this concept of power wheeling will be allowed. Again, that's a massive investment. So there is then going to be that question that companies are going to be faced with today's interest rates and so on. Can you afford to do it? But at least the option becomes available.
So Johan, since when did you start, campaigning for this power wheeling?
Power wheeling is something we've been talking about for the last couple of years.
Couple of years,
because I would say the last 2 years. It's certainly been in our proposals, because it gives us the independence. It also allows us to move. We're under a lot of pressure, apart from the commitments the government has made to move to renewables. We are under a lot of pressure even from our buyers in terms of moving to renewables. But if once you've maxed out your solar, your rooftop, then what do? You buy another building. You have to have some method to do this. So we want to decarbonize. The industry globally is decarbonizing, and that is the way to go. So irrespective, this is a kind of a separate discussion here to the whole price hike. There's a direct impact on it. But for us, we do want to be able to go down this journey of decarbonization of the industry, so that we will hit our own targets that are needed by our buyers. And that is something which, if we get it right, could actually be a competitive advantage for the industry, where we say the benefit of Sri Lanka is this is the amount of energy, that renewable energy that the industry is generating for itself. So this is absolutely crucial that we can do, that it's done. And we believe that this will be accommodated in the amendments to the CB Act, and we can't get that soon enough.
And if we compare to other manufacturing hubs like Vietnam and Bangladesh, where would you say we stand?
So right now we are about on par with Vietnam and Bangladesh. And both of these nations, I'll remind you, have massive duty-free access into markets like the EU and the UK, which we don't. So already for an investor, or even if you take it from a buyer's point of view, he can buy from Vietnam, Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. But if in addition to having a higher energy cost, that it is also higher duty payable in, why would they place the order here? Why would an investor invest in here? So we have to do this to give Sri Lanka the competitive advantage to attract more investment. We're all talking about the path of growth for the economy is to grow exports. We're a $12 billion merchandise export economy. It has to be 22, that's what everybody. But you're only going to get that if you attract new investments, not just in apparel, but in any other industry. And which industry is going to come in when you have a power cost that is uncompetitive?
So, Ms. Jayasinghe, what I want to ask you is, now this mismarriage, now usually the regulator and the CEB officials have to be hand in glove, they have to work together, but there seems to be a mismarriage between the CEB and also the PUSL, and then there is another party which is the stakeholder, which is the Ministry of Energy. What's this? What's going on?
That has been the problem. The whole idea of having a regulator and allowing him to allow the regulation to happen was never there. You see, although there are hundreds of cases where directions have been given by the regulator, CEB chose to ignore. To start with, they refuse to provide the information, which is they are bound to do by the Act itself, but they don't.
But the problem is, Mr. Jayasinghe, all this is coming at a cost.
Exactly.
And that cost is being put in as a burden to the general public of the country.
Exactly.
Why must we be held accountable and responsible just because the PUSL, the CEB and the Minister of Energy has problems? That is not a marriage that we want to be involved in.
Good question. That
is not a marriage that we want to be involved in.
Certainly not. And this is where the consumers will have to raise their voice. Unfortunately, out there we are so docile and ready to be deceived right along. Now, exactly.
I mean, Mr. Jayasinghe, you can't say that people are docile. I mean, recently, just a few months ago, 2 women carried 2 boards and walked on the street. They were threatened with arrest. So now you are saying when the minister, the chairman of the PUCSL or the PUCSL in its entirety, and the CEB has an issue for people to take to the streets and risk getting arrested. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, exactly. That's what they have to come to, because 2 women going there are not enough. There are 2,000 women.
Mr. Jayasinghe, now you might get arrested for suggesting
that. Yes, I'm ready to take that risk.
But can I offer a counterpoint here? You know, so the way you framed it, Shamir, is the politician's framing, because you're asking why is the politician and the police not working together? They are working together. The role of the regulator is not to work with the ministry and the CEB.
No, they have to take an independent view.
Yes, that's exactly right.
There's no question about that. But the problem is, every single time the CEB comes with a suggestion or the minister says something, the regulator opposes it.
Independence doesn't mean hostility.
So the question we have to ask is something different. So going back to what Parakram was saying, see why there are so many traffic violations in this country? Because there is no intent to enforce traffic laws, right? You can be a country of laws so long as the intent is there to hold on to those laws. What we have seen historically is that CB says something, regulator does independent analysis, makes a decision, CB says I don't want to do this and goes into trade union action, CBU. Moment CBU goes to trade union action, minister bends backwards and tries to get the PUCSL to reverse the decision. What you're saying is, it's not that we are held responsible, we are held at ransom. And I will give you a good example. Right now, what are we talking about? We are talking about a 350 billion roughly tariff increase that CEB is trying to do. And I'll give you 2 points to this. In 2016, Mr. Jayasinghe knows this quite well, one person in CEB blocked all the renewable energy projects, single person. Nobody reversed it, right? If that continued from 2016 to 2022, easily our renewable energy would have doubled, right? And the savings that would have given us is 200 billion rupees per annum.
No, but Vidura, let's not forget, at that time, the president was Maithripala Sirisena and the prime minister was Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is now the president.
Correct. I'm saying that this whole system works in a particular way because CEB union decides we want to oppose it and it gets stopped because nobody had a spine to stand up against this, right? Now, you're talking about can I show this?
Yeah, please.
Which camera? This one?
No, just hold it.
That's good. We can see it.
Yeah.
So it's very clear where the cost increase is coming from. You see the 3 items on red. First one is coal, the second 2 is oil. And see all the blues? That's renewables. Now, if you just imagine if we increase the percentage of what is in the blue, what would it happen? How would it impact? Right? So that's where the 200 billion is coming from. The second point, I think the issue we discussed about cost reflectivity. So what that means is, if the utility is spending certain amount of money to generate electricity, that money should be recovered from consumers because there is no opportunity to give a subsidy by the government at this point of time. The problem is, how do we understand what is the correct cost? Right? This is what the regulator does because
Vidura, now you're speaking a lot about renewables. Tell us,
sure.
There's a question that is been posed by a viewer. Tell us the cost of generating renewable energy with backup.
With backup is battery backup.
Yeah, battery backup.
So market rate, if you look at it, 4-hour backup coupled with a solar system is addition is 1 cent per kilowatt hour. Okay, so that's about 350. Right?
350?
No, 350 rupees per
3 rupees and 50 cents.
Yeah. So if your solar price is, let's say, 6 cents, solar plus storage will become 7 cents to 8 cents. So this is nominal. This is not going to change the economics. But the question is different because this is a question that is asked by a person who doesn't understand, who may be not as knowledgeable of how a modern grid works. Right? You can go now on to look at country like Australia, which shows how their grid is running, and ask how much storage they have.
But if it is the CEB that has to do the backup, how much would be the cost?
So why should CEB do the backup? You ask the private sector to do the backup.
The private sector to be involved?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Each one.
Shamir, all of these renewable energy solar projects are already done by CEB. But I'll tell you.
How much would be the approximate cost? Now you say 3 rupees and 50 cents, very well understood,
Shamir,
but how much would it be if the private sector gets involved?
So let's talk about cost but you have to talk about scale, right? One of the reasons renewables are expensive in Sri Lanka is CEB is tendering at 1 megawatt scale. Go and find any other country who tenders a 1 megawatt system. Now the new GM who has come up, he has a fantastic idea. He wants to tender at 75 kilowatts. Right?
Which he tried and didn't work.
It didn't work, but he's going to put it again. If you go to any other country, you tender it 50 megawatt plus, okay? And 50 megawatt project in Sri Lanka can get about 6 cents, 5 cents to 6 cents, US cents per kilowatt hour. I'm talking about international tender. Right. And then you add 1 to 2 cents. And it's cheaper than any fossil fuel source, hands down, right now.
So Sandra, you had a question for one of the panelists.
Yes, I had a question to actually the first gentleman over here. Now, everyone can butt in if needed. Because we were talking about 2016, now Vidura also mentioned 2016 and was pointing a finger towards a certain individual who stopped this renewable power from going forward. Now, it should also be noted that during 2016, President Maithripala Sirisena's government pledged to build 100,000, this is on a community level, of course, 100,000 homes with solar panels. Mm-hmm. Now, as of now, the country has less than 1,000. that's a reality. Those things, if I'm not mistaken, around the number of thousand solar panels in-home.
We have got 46,000.
46,000, that's right.
46,000.
Yeah.
My apologies. So, but despite that, not even close to 100,000 is what I'm trying to point out.
No.
So, if the plans were made, but then a finger was pointed there. So, who was this? I think the people want to know what, where to put the blame to, because the people need to find an outlet in that case as well. So, my question is, why did this not go forward? Why was renewable energy?
Mr. Jayasinha can answer that question.
Certainly.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, actually, we were moving in that direction. We had a bigger target. We want to get 1 million households by 2020.
That was actually the target, 1 million.
That was the target.
That's under the Surya Bala Sangram.
Surya Bala Sangram. And we were very much going in that direction, you see. But and we had a very exponential growth on that one. But what happened is, I might even show you that. What happened is, you can see this. That was a kind of growth. So when this crisis came, and when actually last year, when all of a sudden we had this 13-hour power cuts and all that, we said, for God's sake, get on with this one, fast track this. But of course, by that time already the rupee has crashed, and also we have a dollar crisis.
Right.
So there was a requirement for a tariff revision, right? So we said immediately do that. If somebody was in their senses, they would have done within weeks. But they took months and months of haggling. And eventually, after having agreed with the industry, saying what is sort of reasonable and what is workable at this point of time is about something like 55 rupees or something like that.
45.
Yeah, no, it was 55, they agreed. But eventually they came at the number of 37 rupees. Absolutely impossible. So what we could have, if we started at that time, we could have added at least 200 megawatts during this year, because if it's on a crash, because that's a need. That is, you accept as a reality. By that time, the oil and coal prices have gone through the roof. We know that they are way out of our reach, but they continue to do that.
Because, Mr. Jayasinha, if I'm not intervening here, it's the third line of defense that we have. First, we have thermal, then we have hydro, then we have the other sources of energy for the country. But we are still, as a country, I'm just bringing this out, and in terms of more climate perspective, relying on the sole contributor to climate change, that is coal, as a process, as a generator of electricity. So because this was not done at the time, people are now suffering. I believe even the recent air quality index increase and how it affected, that is of course not with local factors, but despite that, this also contributes to that, because this was not done now, just as Shamir mentioned earlier, the people had to suffer because of those actions back then. So why are we suffering now? Because of that lack of going forward with that action that you said?
Yeah, that is true. That is exactly what we are talking about. All that boils down to coming back to one entity, one monopoly.
That is?
Dictating to, that's CEB.
Okay.
We have no option. You see, little bit of leeway we got one was through things like Surya Bala Sangram.
So,
yeah, we can be the producer.
And we can talk about it. So we had...
Vidura, if I can just interrupt Mr. De Silva now. You've been quite silent throughout the whole discussion. I'd like to just pose this question to you now. According to the discussion that was ongoing, and the other energy expert in the room, Vidura, and of course Mr. Jayasinha as well, their opinion is we don't need a price increase of this scale by next year January. Johan just doesn't like it because it's bad for business. Right? Also, they're saying that Sri Lanka, but they are also conceding the fact that there is an issue with power generation, or how the CEB is generating power and the costing of the same. What is your perspective on this? Do we need a tariff hike by next month? If not, then where do we go? Because there is an issue here, isn't there?
Well, if the tariff hike will come anyway, I think, believe it or not, it might be by next year, it may go up to 75 cents rupees a unit.
So now, right now, how much is the unit?
Now it's about
29.
29.
Average is
29. It's going to go up to about 75.
Yeah,
No, in January, The
It will be
proposed
50
amount
rupees.
is
50
42 and 50 rupees.
50
That's the range.
Yeah.
But you're saying by March next year it will go up to 75
middle of
rupees.
next year. Middle of next year by June.
What's the rationale?
Because the thing is, the government is going to go for LNG because here it says they are going to have more than 5,650 exactly megawatts from LNG, right? So you need LNG for that. Already we have plants 1,433 ready for LNG.
Mr. De Silva, can I pose a short question?
Yeah.
Now, pipe gas is something that European countries are slowly moving away from because of the war. And we've seen European countries purchasing the LNG type of gas as well. Right now, when we saw because of that, Asian countries are losing a grip of LNG as well. Now, with the world moving towards the Asian world rather, moving towards a deficit of LNG, you're saying that we will, as Sri Lanka, as the way we are now, we'll be able to move forward with LNG?
No, thing is, LNG is actually liquefied natural gas. So we go for natural gas, right? The natural gas is the one goes to the power plant, not the LNG, right? LNG we bring because we cannot bring the gas, so we liquefy it and bring it. That is for transportation. And then we regasify, right? That is why we need FSRU, floating storage and regasification unit. So that brings the LNG and regasify and send it to the plant. So that has been very popular before this crisis in Russia. Because the whole thing turned around because Russia is the main supplier for gas to Europe, right? So Russia closed the tap. Now Europe doesn't have gas. And Germany, like countries like Germany, they don't have even oil, right? So they have to have the winter for us. We don't need gas for that much because we don't have a winter. But for them, everything power.
No, let's, Mr. De Silva, I think we are getting a little bit off track. We're talking about other countries, but I think what the topic today is about Sri Lanka. That's the context.
No, because he asked me. That is
yeah, I know. Let's
I'll tell you
talk
the
about
price.
Sri Lankan
The
context.
question is about Sri Lanka.
Yeah,
with the
I'll
currency.
tell you. Now, the last year,
Right.
when NFE, they forwarded the proposal, they said they can give electricity using LNG 12 cents, US cents per kilowatt per unit.
Right. Okay.
Right? So that is the agreement, that is the number they offered,
So this was last year, September.
September.
This is not agreement, this was the MOU.
Yeah.
MOU.
Yeah.
And
Whatever
there
you
were
go.
also ifs and buts on that.
Yeah, whatever, because, right. Anyway, now, if you go on that, say that is 12 cents. Now, if you say it's 20 cents now, because the price has gone up, no, gases, even if you say 20 cents, if you say 20 cents, how much is a unit in rupees? It will be 72. Because the rupee is 360 rupees.
Yeah, that's
Right, even the 50 rupees is 14 cents. We are talking about 50 rupees, that is 14.
There is a hype, Vidru, that's very serious.
40
No,
is
no,
US cents.
I would like to
Yeah.
come back here.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
see,
yeah,
What he says true is going to be 70 rupees.
Yeah.
Now, there are two principles that we are supposed to be having. One is that the Electricity Act says we must go for the least economic cost to start with, right? And they were doing cooking numbers all the time, trying to show that coal is the cheapest. Utterly cooked numbers, right? Now even they can't do. You can't do any amount of cooking to show that coal is going to be cheaper than renewable.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, not anymore. No, same thing goes for fossil fuels also. So what is necessary is at least somebody had to say, you have a policy saying that it's my least cost. Plus, at last the CB has also accepted that we should be 70%
So
renewable.
let's look at the numbers very quickly because you all are the experts. Let me pose a question to you. Okay. Renewables, how much is a unit cost?
So current,
With battery backup? as far as don't talk about private sector.
Shamir, I want to stop you there.
Yeah.
Because battery backup is not a necessity at this stage of time.
Right. Okay. Right. So,
right? So let's not confuse the issues.
No, but we have to look at 5 years, 10 years from now. We can't. When we speak about energy, we can't look at the short term.
No,
that's the mistake that.
I understand that, but
everyone has been doing.
Let's
look at the long term. How much is let's look at the numbers very quickly. How much is a cost per unit as far as renewables are concerned?
Yeah, let me show you this chart, which was shown by one of the CB engineers.
Right. I don't think we can capture that. If you can just explain that.
Yeah, basically this was quarter 2022, quarter 1 and quarter 2. But CB engineers came for a discussion and said that, okay, average cost at that time was 27 rupees.
27 rupees
for
renewables?
No, CEB thermal IPP.
Okay, thermal, right, okay.
Yeah. And subtotal was 49 for those.
So 49 rupees.
Yeah, at that time, right? Because
49.
of...
Okay, right, understood. Okay,
yeah.
now
Then you answer your other question.
Yeah.
Subtotal for the renewables was 11 rupees and 51 cents.
11 rupees and 51 cents.
Yeah.
Coal, how much?
Well, they were claiming it to be 15 and 93, but it is actually 32.
Shamir, I'll give you this because this is and there's a qualifier to this, and this is based on the document shared by CB and the minister recently, right? And you can see CB hydro is at 248, CB wind is 576, small scale renewables, this is the NCRE projects, this is at 1937, rooftop solar at 22, coal at 4792, private oil plants 8441. CEB oil plants 93.48. Okay. Now, the reason I was saying about how this, because you can't build renewables at this 19 and 22 anymore because the dollar has changed, right? So now you will get about 35 to 40 rupees per unit. But if we didn't stop our momentum by blocking it, we would have got a lot more at that price already on rupee tariff. And that's where we did the mistake number one.
Fixed for the next 20 years.
It's fixed for the next 20 years. But still now, the 37 is still 37 or 45 what we are talking about is still cheaper than anything that is on, right? And they will stay on rupee basis, right? So that's number one.
Right.
Now,
So if now there are lot of issues when you speak about renewables and all that. I'll tell you what the issues are. Now, when you speak about renewables, the general notion that the government may have, in their opinion, is that some trying to make a buck. Someone is trying to make a quick buck to bring in renewables into the country.
Why isn't the same question asked when you are talking about fossil fuel?
So nobody is making a buck on coal shipments. Nobody is making money on the oil shipments that's coming in. Nobody is making money on emergency power. We purchased emergency power from ACE Amvilipitiya this year. We ran it 8% of the time.
No, there was an allegation leveled
So who made money?
No, but there was an allegation leveled at the PUSL chairman, saying that we are obtaining power from affiliated companies where he's in the director board of many power generation companies. So,
but then the PUSL doesn't decide from whom to buy?
It's done by CEB, no?
It's done by CEB.
So that's their responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
So, Shamir, let's ask a question. We are on a commercial world.
No.
Why do we think, and this is a problem for everybody, why do we think renewable developers should be doing charity and not earning profits while oil companies, private thermal power companies, oil suppliers, coal suppliers are all free to make profit?
But the danger is, to all the four gentlemen who are here today, is the fact that now the government is looking at going forward with restructuring the Ceylon Electricity Board.
Correct.
Good. By doing that, would they make sure that the regulator is out of the equation as far as tariff hikes are concerned?
Regulator is the one everywhere in the world. It is the regulator who decides the tariff. It's not the utility.
So, but Shamir, on that point, I mean,
any country, Bangladesh, India, US, anywhere you go.
And as a consumer, we need somebody
because they can change that. Look at the Inland Revenue Act. What happened? They were talking about it, debating about it. There were court cases against it. At the end of the day, it was passed.
Shamir,
if there was an act brought in against on the CEB, it would be the same format.
So there is a cabinet paper and a report on the reform. Have you read this? it very clearly articulates how the industry is going to run. So there is
has
a
to have a
specific
regulator.
role
You
of the
can't run
regulator.
without regulator.
And trust me, because we are moving into a completely different system. Why? We had a monopoly supplier who dominated the supply of electricity, right? And it's a vertically integrated issue. They decided what plants to be built, what plants to buy from. Not based on a commercial reality, but based on their preferences and their numbers. And that lack of independence is what led us here. And the idea on the reform is that you dismantle the monopoly structure, you make the procurement and dispatch completely independent, separately audited with separate lines of accountability, and that is separate from the generation. All the generation units of CEB will put on power purchase agreement same way as the IPP. So if they don't generate enough or if they are not efficient, they will not get paid.
Vidura, now we've had this conversation, focusing on the highly technical aspect of things. I'd just like to direct one question to Johan. Now, Johan, you were following the conversation. By what you gathered, of course, you already have a good understanding of what the issue in the power sector really is, and of course, from your independent research as well. Now, as a member of the apparel sector and also being involved in running industries in Sri Lanka, of course, you know the plight of the SMEs because you're in the larger sector, and you also spoke about the SMEs. Understanding the problem, right? Now, we need solutions to the problem. What would be ideal next year as far as running your businesses and also addressing this issue to some extent is concerned?
So
what would be ideal?
So let me put it this way. We all know that the cost is driven up finally by the cost of furnace oil and diesel. That's what's driving the cost of generation up. And if we look at, and coal, I beg your pardon, there's those three. If we look at what's happening in the economy right now, apart from the drop that we are seeing in apparel exports, the economy is contracting. CB demand, as Vidura said, is also falling. When demand falls, we're using less of the thermal. So how can we justify a price increase at a time when you are changing your mix to move more to the cheaper ones? So we have a window of opportunity now as manufacturers, as exporters, and I'm sure as everybody, nobody wants the recession that we're facing to continue. But whilst we have this window, there is no need for the power hike, because if we are seeing a 16 or 18% drop in the requirement of power, then that in itself means that our actual cost of generation is lower. Yeah. So our view is look at the reality, look at the last 3 months and use that data. We agree on a cost reflective tariff. We don't want, but that cost has to be a competitive cost. So that cost has to have transparency, has to have visibility. And this is where we see the role of the PCUSL as being absolutely vital as a regulator to protect not just the industrialists, but the day-to-day consumer.
Johan, just looking at how things happened in the past, now when this price hike, usually the procedure, as far as the black letter law is concerned, is that the CEB submits a proposal to the PUCSL, the PUCSL reviews that proposal, holds stakeholder consultation meetings, and only then do they approve this tariff hike. Did you attend stakeholder consultations?
Yes, we did. So for the last tariff hike, we did. We made written submissions and physical submissions as well.
So the minister said that a tariff hike is definitely coming in the month of January, today I believe. So on that, did you attend any stakeholder consultations now?
No, because this PUCSL has not called for a stakeholder consultation.
Right. So moving to Mr.
Shalin, if I may, I just have a follow-up question. So as of today, the IMF loan acquisition has been pushed further back, and they've said, not January, has to be acquired somewhere around March or April. In tandem with that and a potential hike in the cost, what is the impact on SMEs and even in your own sector?
It's going to be very, very difficult. We are already seeing companies in the SMEs guys are really struggling. They just don't have the work. Now there's a limit to how long you can continue if you don't have work. So if this continues, then we will certainly see the SME sector shrinking, for sure.
Because when they talk about 10-hour power cuts, that sends a very negative signal. It sends an amber signal, red signal to the investor at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Now you come in from an export hub, Johan. your life must be difficult, and even your customers may ask you,
So absolutely.
what is the future going to hold as far as the apparel industry in Sri Lanka is concerned?
So
This is an industry that contributes almost 6% to the GDP.
Absolutely, 60% of GDP, 48% of merchandise exports. And this is where what we've been able to say is, look, when we had the power cuts, because of the fact that industries were able to run generators, procure diesel by paying in dollars, we were able to keep the wheels turning. And if you look at our exports right through all of that crisis, we've continued. So
And exports have done well.
they had done exceedingly well, and that's including the SME companies. You know, whether we've done arrangements, whether we've borrowed or whatever, procured diesel so they can run their plants, shift working around the power cuts. So our position is actually that right now we have 2-hour power cuts, and we've all learned to live with it, both individually and as businesses. And this is again coming back to the issue of the power hike, is where I'm saying, look, you have a reduction in demand. We're willing to work with the 1-hour, 2-hour power cuts. It's already there. If you look at all of that, then you really need to revisit whether this price hike is actually needed or not. And
even
if we
look
do
at
it now and we say not, we revisit.
But let's for a moment, Johan, let's think about the businesses later. Let's look at the people for an example.
Exactly.
Look at the cost of living. Can they afford a price hike?
So can I put a question to everybody?
No, unfortunately, Ms. Lisa, don't ask questions from us today. You can ask questions from all three.
To everybody.
Because unfortunately, we are not in a position to answer your questions today.
No, to everybody.
You would have loved to.
No. Just leave the price hike for the side for a minute. Even to whether it's high price or low price, we must have electricity to buy.
Yes.
Is the electricity available?
You have to make it generate,
Right.
otherwise you won't buy it.
No.
The low demand?
No, let me now.
Yes.
At the current demand?
Hydro, we have gone for maximum 1,500. We can't go any more than
So the
that.
next 3 years, there's not going to be increase in demand.
Then you are
Very
talking
straightforward.
about, these two gentlemen are talking about renewables, right? Hydro also renewables.
Also renewable, yes.
The thing is, these renewables we are at the mercy of the nature. Rain might stop, no sunshine, no wind, no renewables.
Okay.
That is why we have to have base load covered with either coal or LNG.
With your permission,
Let
me
me
get...
interrupt.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Are we ready to be at the mercy of Russia and the world market instead of being depending on what they are predictable? All the nature, these things are
What
predictable.
happens to base load? What
Okay,
happens to
so
base
let me
Base load is old hat.
It's
You see that?
base load as a
It's an
concept.
ancient concept.
Base load as a concept does not exist anymore. Okay, if you take a country like Australia, which is flush with coal and gas, we'll get 83% out of their total electricity out of renewables by 2030. Okay, they'll exceed us. Even if you look at it now,
Right, now
they're closing all their coal plants and gas plants to get to renewables.
Right. Okay, now again, Ms. Lisa, you have an opportunity to respond. Now, Australia is an example. Vidura was saying. Now, did that answer your question?
No.
Then tell me.
Australia has money to spend because the renewable is good, because I worked in renewables.
I thought you worked in gas.
No, wait a minute. I worked on the 1,000 megawatt wind plant, the first biggest wind plant built in UK, London Array. I worked on that in 2007, and that is operational now. So I worked in the wind industry as well. I worked as the business development director in this region. Right? I visited many countries trying to promote wind energy.
Right.
Even,
So
right.
Mr. De Silva is saying, Vidura, we are not Australia. Basically, that's right.
Right. He also said that they are rich. We are not rich.
Yeah, because
so we should be looking at different.
So I think
you know how much it will cost. Let me explain. Wind energy is good. If we can build 1,000 megawatt in the sea, that is the answer for us. Because we have a massive sea. We must go offshore wind. But we can't. We don't have money for that kind of investment.
So, but
That
we
is
have
the
money to
problem.
build LNG
No,
We have money to buy
expensive.
coal, we have
LNG is
money
not that
to buy
expensive.
gas,
That is
we
the
have
problem.
money to buy
LNG
oil.
is not that expensive.
No, the
Oh, it
plant
is.
is not expensive.
Okay.
But LNG has gone up recently because of this Russian
So
crisis.
De Silva, you itself said now a short while ago, 75 rupees.
Yes,
It's
no,
because
no,
of
no,
LNG,
right.
that's not
Yeah,
because
No,
of
he's saying the
renewables.
power
That's
plant.
the LNG. Yeah, no, that's LNG is
Yeah,
75.
LNG is 75 rupees.
Yeah,
75 rupees is it's not a money.
No, and also,
Now
then
we're
why,
Now we're
what
talking
price
about
is
going,
this
price
cost?
going up to 50.
40 to
We're
50
talking
rupees.
about
75, then what happens?
So let's clarify
No,
some
now-
points.
Ivan is
We
already
all-
standing up to
there
me.
is electricity.
Now, the problem is the last 2 years, because of this Russian war, the oil prices and the gas prices, they're in a bit of a high side, right? But you know how much it was LNG prices are, I can tell you. In 2020,
That was a
in
pandemic
Europe,
year.
last May,
That
the
was a pandemic.
LNG was $1.57.
That was because of
The
pandemic
pandemic,
depressed
right.
demand.
How
What are
can we
talking
depend
about?
on something not
I
in
mean,
our control?
I think crude oil also went to negative levels,
Yes, yes,
minus
exactly.
$30,
You know,
minus $40 during the
yeah,
pandemic. Mr.
That
De
is
Silva.
came up. It came up. Let me finish. Now, before the Asia, the lowest 2022 was $20.
That's why we should
Right.
do it.
But it's fluctuate. So,
Now-
but
So,
still,
Mr. De Silva, just one question,
no.
just to put this in.
Yeah.
Why aren't we ready to face reality?
Mr. De Silva, so according to what you're saying,
No,
it's expensive to.
Yeah, let's, first of all, here, I know you all have questions, but we have to get this, we have to come into a proper conclusion on this subject. So, what is Mr.
No, basically I said
Jayasinghe's-
earlier
thoughts?
that we have a principle of going for least economic cost.
Right, okay.
So when Mr. Nimal says that it is going to be 75 and all our renewables are way below, why are
Why
we even
not
looking
that?
at
No,
it?
but Mr. Jayasinghe, I think what Mr. De Silva is saying, Mr. De Silva, correct me if I'm wrong, he's saying that it's expensive to build the offshore wind power plant.
Yeah.
Once you build it, it's cheap,
It's
but
zero
to build
cost.
it, it's
Yeah, I know,
expensive.
but is that the only solution?
LNG,
Yeah.
it's cheap to build, but after you build, it's expensive.
And it's
so
forever.
how do we strike a balance, Mr. De Silva?
No,
would you
that's,
explain?
I think economists will have to.
actually UK,
So-
right?
so let's
UK
ask
has a
the
lot of
question.
offshore wind, right?
Right.
Recently, they built there's a 3 gigawatt one. Now there's another one coming at 4 gigawatt.
I understand, but can you
Right.
answer the question?
But that is because
Can I
those
answer your
countries,
question?
they have money to spend.
Okay.
We
So the
don't
question
have
is,
that kind
how
of
do we
money.
strike a balance
So,
between the two
can I answer the
to go
question?
Yeah.
forward?
So let's
Yeah,
think
we
about.
need
I think
time for
Mr.
that.
De Silva just-
We need time for that. That is why,
That is one thing we don't have. We are talking about power cut tomorrow.
No, let me explain. Right, power cut tomorrow, you won't have even this solar or wind to cover that. You have to go for fuel, right? Thermal. Because you can't depend on, this is what before solar or we have hydro now.
Yes.
Why we are worried about? Because you know that there won't
No,
be
Mr.
any
De Silva,
rain.
I still don't get your argument. Now, what I said before, so it's cheap to build LNG, but high cost to operate.
No, that's
It's expensive to build offshore wind, but low cost after that.
No cost
yeah,
to operate.
operation is
Low
very
cost
low
operation.
cost,
Not
yeah.
low
No
cost.
cost.
No cost.
No cost operation.
No
Okay,
cost.
so
No,
you're
there's a
saying
maintenance cost.
Yeah.
but based on those two calculations, LNG and high cost operation is better than high cost
At the
and
moment, because we don't have that kind of money to invest. Because doing an offshore wind farm,
Why do we
Wait,
want to
wait a
build
minute, wait a
offshore? Why
minute,
don't we
let
build
me
it
explain
onshore first?
the 350 megawatt is the economical size. So we don't build anything less than 300. It's not economical.
So we have built 100 megawatt one
So
now.
let's
No,
let's
that
put
is
some
on-
numbers
on
Your
on the
final
Onshore.
table.
remark,
Onshore.
Mr. De Silva, is that Sri
I'm talking
Lanka,
about offshore.
Sri Lanka's
So I-
current
so let's
atmosphere
talk about
doesn't
offshore.
suit sustainability.
Let's
Is that
talk. Let's talk about offshore.
Okay.
Right. World Bank just did the study on offshore wind potential in Sri Lanka. Our total capacity possible after excluding the environmental sensitive areas is 35 gigawatts.
Yeah, I have all the
Right?
documents here.
Now, I understand that. The issue is that how do we do power sector planning? We go on a basis called levelized cost of electricity, because different power plants have different characteristics. Some power plants have high capital cost but no operational cost. Some plants have capital cost and operational cost. So you normalize it and check it. So the simple question is that let's look at CB wind. CB wind, according to CB's own data, is 5 rupees and 76. So before we go to offshore, why don't we do onshore? We have about 3,000 megawatts worth of wind onshore. that can be built, and this is the number.
First of all, a lot of people are asking me questions as to what are renewables.
Renewables is solar, wind, hydro, and biomass.
Fossil fuel.
They've got mixed up.
If I can,
yes, please.
Mr. Vidura, getting back to the basics, something that our audience can actually understand. I think one of the most cardinal issues is the uneven distribution of the power cuts in itself. I think that's something that a lot of people have been wanting to know. It's so uneven. And can you comment on that?
I'm sorry.
So it is controversial, but we'd like to hear your thoughts about it.
I agree that the power cuts are uneven, and it fails a principle called equity, right? We have to share the burden. We can't be passing the burden to some people and not have it into the other people. So I fully agree that what is being done from the day power cut started has not been equitable and ethical. Right? I wish I have a solution to give, but I don't.
But Mr. Alpanam, I think there was a case filed in the Supreme Court subject to correction, on this matter of equitable power cuts.
Yeah.
There was a case.
And really, if you talk about equity, to start with, it must be first cut off for all the leaders.
But their areas are never cut off.
Yeah, that exactly is fine.
I believe
that
the
is fine.
prices of
that is
houses
why I
in
said that people have to come to the
because
street.
of this.
Correct. And it's also not only, I mean, there are bureaucrats also who are getting
bureaucrats
excluded.
also.
So,
No,
and I think here's where one area that PUCSL failed in terms of effective regulation, because they should have said, okay, this is how it should be done, and it should be done in that way. I agree with the viewer who said that, and it's not fair.
No,
and I'm saying it as a person who has not had power cuts. I think it's not
Can
fair.
I just add just a non-technical piece? Now, we would all agree that things like hospitals shouldn't have power cuts and so on. So is there an issue that you can't not cut power to a hospital and then, you can't provide power to the hospital, but then surrounding areas you can't cut powers to those? Is there a sort of a technical reason where you can't?
But that is not the only areas that
Yeah, that's the issue.
That's
key.
exactly. You can understand
Nobody is
that.
going
We
to
are
object to a
talking about,
hospital not being cut, but
equity.
politicians.
If we're talking about equity itself, I should mention in a survey done by the Asian Development Bank in March, 90% of students were affected. They couldn't access online education because of the power cut. So is
100%
the
right.
equity factor
how
really
equity
given
is.
into consideration or what?
So, and the problem is now when you're talking about equity, there are ministers who have not paid their bills coming up to 10 million. And just imagine, will a citizen get that opportunity?
Yeah.
Just imagine if a citizen doesn't pay his bill 1 month, the next month it's been cut off. He will get a red notice and that's about it. That's the end of the story. But ministers' bills goes up to around 10 million to 15 million rupees. Look at
The fact that it goes up to 10 million is an issue in itself.
In the first place, why did it go up that far? No.
Even
Actually, we'll have to come
36,000
back and face
is high.
reality. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
What do we do? Right? Now, if we, at least now we should have realized we are here in this position because of the dependence on imported fossil fuel. I emphasize the word imported fossil fuel. If we had coal or we had oil, this story would be different. Then, of course, it's only the environmental factor that might come in. But it is all imported. We are talking about availability of gas out there in Mana. When it comes, I don't know. Till then, this is what caused us this problem. We said this was 30 years ago.
The gas in Mana comes just before an election.
Yeah, that's true. 30 years ago, we said this is going to happen, that all the money we earn from tea, rubber and coconut will not be enough to pay for the oil that we import. That happened in 2010. And now we are dependent on, earlier we were dependent on the poor women who were bringing us some money and some, when that crashed, we are now totally dependent on borrowing and some more borrowing. What are they doing? The government doing all that. So when are we going to get out of that? This is the time. I look at this one in a very much different way, Johan, because you people, and one single thing I hope would happen if this reform is really.
Yep.
That will give us the independence to look after our own needs, you see, and using asset for which we all paid for.
Yep.
We have superb
Network.
transmission system, which we all paid for. You see, all of us, including the smallest man, smaller consumer.
Yep.
So we have a right for that. So if we can get that one, that is one positive thing.
Yeah.
And also, sorry, Johan.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And for that, you have to pay the CB a transmission.
That's
and
okay.
That, again, our thing is let's be transparent, let's be open, let's see what those costs are. Because that then gives business the predictability that they can do. The other key in this whole thing is that, as I said, with this contraction in demand, we have to set an electricity rate that's based on what our current position is. If in 3 months we have to review it and the economy is picked up, exports have gone, and we're moving back into more thermal and the cost of generation, we look at it at that.
No, but sometimes the problem is, talking about the people's affordability and all that, the problem is when the minister says in his Twitter account that is accessible only to a section of the population in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, because of the fact that Twitter is not available across the grassroots in the country.
Not look at power cut times anyway.
Look at the predicament of the people, Johan. Now that's what I don't understand. Look at the predicament of the people when the minister says 24th, 25th or 26th, there are no power cuts. First, there are no power cuts. Must the people be happy with all this? Why must the people be happy with all this? We are in this position today because of politicians. We are in this position today because of the problem that has been created by politicians in this country. Why must the people face the brunt? That's my question.
Not only the politicians, bureaucrats
as well.
Bureaucrats and politicians. But why must we face it? Now, when I go home after a tired day of work, when I have 1.5 hours or 2.5 hours of power cut, what does that leave me?
Probably because we voted them in.
I think the other issue that you're going to have,
Tariffs.
the other issue you're going to have is that if this increase comes through, the economy that is contracting quite fast at the moment will go into free fall. Because people will just, in January we'll start seeing the impact of the income tax thing and so on. People will not have the money to survive.
So
and this is what I'm saying. If as the figures show, it's not necessary because the demand isn't there.
Yeah, Johan, the problem is
why are we jumping to do this now?
Johan, my problem is this. Now we're talking about energy. We're talking about problems with energy. We're talking about saving money. Look at what the government is spending money on having
Christmas
parties, Christmas carols, spending millions of public money. Is that the need of the hour? Why
yesterday
we prioritize?
This week we had a new GM who came to CEB. There were paid newspaper advertisements advertising that a new GM came to the CEB. That's how CEB is spending, and we are supposed to pay for it. But I want to go back to this demand conversation, Shamir, and there's a reason for that. Because the worry we have is that there is a huge number put out as the tariff increase, and this is not correct. Now, why is that a problem? Now, first you ask, what is the impact of the current tariff hike? Now, this document actually shows how the daily energy consumption has reduced, gone through free fall within a current year. Okay, and I'm going to show you a second one. This is compared to 2021 and 2022. Now, you see this massive 10% plus reduction that is happening. This is the result of the October tariff hike, right? We have a demand contraction compared to last year by 10%, right? The industrial demand, that's what we were talking about, is already contracted by 16%. That is going to have a serious economic implication.
Vidura, let's look at very simple things now. After the government imposed this 2.5 hours of power cuts, have we been able to save any money or to save some electricity?
Yeah.
We have been.
Because they use fuel, no? They stop using fuel. That is why the power cut is.
Yeah. So do you think we will have prolonged power cuts even after the price is increased in January?
For sure, because the problem is not rupee. Problem is the dollar. You don't have dollars to import coal. We don't have dollars to import oil. So price increase doesn't mean that government is suddenly going to be flush with dollars.
So that means the people will have power cuts, extended power cuts, and also high electricity
So
bills.
extended power cuts is something that we cannot comment because
Debatable,
it's debatable. And extendable means even one.
Now, we have crisis power. We have only 3 solutions, right? Either we go for solar, wind, or LNG.
Or Dendro. You are all forgetting Dendro.
That is that's another useless thing if you talk about, because it's
Why do you say useless? Because you don't want to do it.
No, look at this.
You don't understand anything about it.
No, I know, because you need 200 acres to cover.
So, we have
so where is the land?
We have got 1.6 million scrub lands in this country. You people talk nonsense without knowing what the facts are.
No, that is not a practical decision.
It is not a practical. We have approved, done it and so on it, until the CB went and blocked it. We had 55 megawatts of Dendro working.
even in their future plans, they have only how much safe.
That's right. Now, do you know that
problem is that-
JICA and ADB both say that we can have 2,500 megawatts of dendro, and it is firm power.
Thing is, you all are getting this thing with the renewables, but we have to be practical.
Yes,
we need electricity.
We need electricity, and it
Right.
doesn't have to come
Sorry,
through
so
fossil fuel.
let's ask a simple question. Why do we not have sorry, Shamil, please. Why do we not have electricity? Is it because we don't have power plants, or is it because we can't afford
this
coal?
is a very simple question. Now let's look at
Why do we have power cut? Is it
Why do
because
we have power cut? That's a very good question that was posed by Vidura. Why do we have power cuts?
Is it because we don't
If
have
we
power
had
plants or
renewables,
coal?
if we had renewables, won't the situation be much better?
And I'll give you a good example.
We will ask Mr. Disabled.
Right, no, I just add to that. We have renewable energy power suppliers who have not been paid for 14 months. There's an outstanding debt of 38 billion. Still they are generating. Now you stop paying fossil fuel companies.
Those are small producers. I know that problem.
Small producers
I know
produce
that
10% of the power.
40 billion.
If we had renewables, wouldn't this problem become much more easier for Sri Lankan citizens? Very simple.
Simple.
That's all I'm
Say
asking.
that again.
If we had
renewables in Sri Lanka,
More renewables.
if we had more renewables in Sri Lanka, won't the situation be better for Sri Lanka?
Don't ask me that question. Ask this.
No, but
question.
you have
of
to
course
answer.
it
You have
is.
to
No,
answer. You have
the
to answer.
renewable is.
Well, you're saying LNG is also part of this, but I'm asking
the
you.
renewable, the energy security, you cannot depend on the nature 100%. Right? So
We can't
need
depend
to
on our
have
dollars
some,
100%.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not talking about 100% though. I mean, it's not
talking about
possible to 100%. I think we are looking at about
you
30%.
need electricity. So this gentleman has a factory. He needs to run his factory.
So he can run his.
So if the rain is not there, there's no hydro.
But Mr.
Sorry, I will answer this. When
Have you been able to go around Sri Lanka in the recent past and look at factories like apparel manufacturers, take a look at organizations like the biggest apparel manufacturers for MAs?
I'm not against the renewables, but we have to have a mix.
I think
We have to have a mix. We have to have a
in one of the
balance.
apparel
So I think that
companies.
the issue is we don't have a mix. We have so much of fossil fuel, not enough of renewable.
So-
The
what
mix is wrong. The
what
whole
is-
issue right now is
so
our
that-
energy generation
so that-
mix is wrong.
I think that's what.
So I want to be
We
very
have to have
clear
the
here.
right mix.
So Mr. De Silva, in your ideal right
I-
mix, does that call for an increase in non-renewables, fossil fuels?
Yes, LNG.
Then where is our 70% renewable?
Then where are we going to get our
So
As
let's
far as the 70%.
I'm sorry, Mr. De Silva, but you're alone. I mean, on
no,
sitting on this
no,
because all three panelists are against.
I'll show
do
you.
we
No,
have
it's not about Sean.
Do we have
correct
energy
me. It's not
security
about
now?
foreign
there is nothing.
No, I mean,
for-
on
for
this
or
point,
against.
on this
but
point.
What we have to
Do
understand
we-
is it's a constructive engagement.
Yes.
Do we have
and we are
energy
trying to
security
give
now?
a constructive
Against the
thought
argument,
to the people.
not against Mr. De
Do
Silva.
we have energy security now?
No.
If we have power
No,
cuts, do
Mr.
we
De
have
Silva, my
energy
question is now you spoke about this ideal mix.
look at
so to
this.
get this ideal mix, should we increase
So we
renewables or not?
can go for wind 1,500. We can go for
We
solar
can-
2,000.
So who says this? This is an old document.
old
This
document
is
you are
no
looking at to
longer
start with.
valid. This is 2 years ago generation plan.
No, this is one I made.
So
This
you,
nobody
you also can make a different
this-
one with
right.
these larger numbers. CB itself has made a generation plan larger numbers than that.
Much larger.
But isn't the point this, that our
Because we
generation...
can't,
No, but let's
we can't have this conversation based on
yeah, but no
this
point
kind
of,
of bad
no
analysis.
point of talking about a subject that we probably won't have any headway. Okay, so let's look at a solution. Okay, what is the solution? Let's start off with Johan. What is the solution,
The
Johan?
solution is we have to change the generation mix. We have to move to more renewables for two reasons. One is we move away from being dependent on fossil, on oil and stuff which we don't have and we're importing. So we're insulating ourselves from that. We're generating at a lower rate. And to answer your question, would we be in this, if we had double the renewable capacity that we have today, would we be in the position we are today with power cuts? No, because you have that power. And you don't need the dollars. So for our argument, the price hike needs to be re-looked at, particularly into the next 3 to 6 months when the economy is going to contract. That demand is not going to be there. Therefore, you don't need as much fuel as you've been predicting. So therefore, you shouldn't need as much a power hike. And number two, how do we how do we fast track? How do we really make this move on renewables? Because if we had done that, and I know ifs and buts, but we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today.
But also, Johan, you come from a private sector company. So right now the people have not yet felt the pinch of even the tax increases yet.
Absolutely.
Starting January, they will begin to feel that pinch. And what will happen?
And when you feel that pinch, and then you have higher domestic,
costing.
I don't know. I can't answer
If I may
that.
add a small question to this so that we can begin, because we spoke about the political side, from the people's side, but from the SME side, I'm sure there's a lot of people from this community watching. How do they brace for what is coming? How do they brace for what is coming in the next year, like Shamir also mentioned, because the taxes are not only on a personal level, but on company level, SMEs, everyone, and especially the smaller peak of the herd, that is the SMEs, will be affected fast. If you were to address them watching at home right now, how should they brace?
I don't have an answer. I cannot see how they can continue.
The best example is, Johan, I come from a private sector company and I work for an export hub as well. When the electricity tariff, the cuts were there, when we had to buy fuel from private sector companies in Sri Lanka, whether it be a company that is bunkering fuel or whatever it is, the generation cost went up by 150 rupees per unit.
Absolutely.
So
and you can't pass that on. Your customers are going to say,
that is based on
That's if you're not CB.
That's based on fossil fuel. And this is simple mechanics. Don't look at it.
And this is the difference. We can't pass that price on. What the CB says is, I'm losing money. I'll increase the tariff.
Yeah. And
you know. So where is the equity in that?
And then we lose our market share in the global market as a result of that. People go to Vietnam, people go to Bangladesh. Now I work in the tea industry. People are going to Vietnam again. People are going to Indonesia. People are going to Kenya. People are going to India. And look at what's happening today to the industry. We won't be able to generate the dollars that we're supposed to generate.
100% right.
And it's sad.
And that combined with the contraction of the domestic economy will send the economy into
dire straits. And there may even be a banking crisis in the months ahead if the situation is not arrested.
Correct.
And this is what is sad, Mr. Jaising. There is nothing else. Now, Mr. De Silva, your point is well taken, but what I think these three panelists, and even Shalan, Sandro and Shania and we are posing these questions to you because we want answers. Why are we in this country today? Because of the incompetency of politicians and bureaucrats. Why are we held ransom? Why are the people held ransom? Because of that.
Mr. Vidran, I actually have a follow-up question. So one of the IMF conditionalities is actually to restructure the CEB, but the unions will keep blocking it. So supposing this doesn't happen, how is that conditionality going to be filled?
So restructuring is going forward. The draft ESRA Act, Energy Sector Reform Act, drafting has already started. And the expectation is that it will be tabled in the Parliament within maximum 3 months. So that process is moving forward. So in CEB, there is one union. This is the extreme union called CEB EU. This is the guy who went and said 10-hour power cut. These are the only guys who are objecting. And the JVP union. Everybody else is aligned with it. Even the CEB management, IESL, all of the organizations are aligned with it because they have realized that current situation cannot go forward. So I don't see a reason why this reform should not happen because I haven't seen significant opposition towards that. Even all of the parliamentarians who met the reform committee has said that they will support it. So I don't see that.
The only question is, it is going to be privatized. You see, I personally am against privatizing that. But
privatize CEB?
CEB. So the reform has to be, because I would like to answer that question.
But if you look at privatizing electricity grids, if you look at countries like the UK, they've successfully done it.
Provided we have a very strong regulator who looks after the consumers. So that's 100% this thing. I hope that is also factored in.
Yeah, because when you speak about privatizing electricity, it has happened in many countries.
Yes,
it has happened in many countries, and the regulator plays a vital role.
Exactly.
So if you look at the large energy generators in India, for example, companies like NTPC, which started as 100% state-owned entity, is now partly owned by private organization.
And what is sad is, taking a look at a country like India, our neighbor, look at the way in which how they're moving towards renewables.
Massive.
It's big.
Yep.
And now they're talking about how AI can be brought forward to predict energy requirements for the people.
Shamir, in 2018, they set up 11 renewable energy management centers to predict solar and wind generation half an hour in advance. And this is 2019. This is where, and we are still talking about what happens when rain doesn't come, what happens when sun doesn't come. This level of conversation is going to keep us stuck there.
I want to, Vidura, just give me a second. We want to wrap the show as well because we can't go up until 11:30. But Ms. Risera, what is the solution now? All the fingers are pointed at you for some reason. But what is the solution now? What is the solution?
The solution is the long term, we have to go for renewables. But the short terms, we have to.
I am so glad, Mr. Silva, these three gentlemen have been able to convince you.
No.
To go
So, but when do we start long-term renewables? When do we start?
No, that is what I've been told for the last 10 years.
I can
long
show you
term we have to go.
This is what I have prepared. This is 30% fuel, right? 70% renewable.
Yeah.
But we have to go,
That's the government's commitment by 2030. Just to put that in context, that's the commitment the government has given.
But the problem is you go slowly, you will not survive until 2030.
Exactly.
Because now let's talk about LNG because Mrs. Silva brought it up. There is no way in hell LNG is going to come in 2024. No chance. To bring a FSRU, it takes minimum 3 years.
But now
this
look
is
at,
nonsense.
now look at the Gotabaya Rajapaksa manifesto, Mr. Jayasingh. What does it say?
It says
80%. 80%. And a few months after, they are signing a contract for coal power plant.
And the
That
person who pushed the coal power plant, person who moved the 80 to 70, and person who repeatedly across the last 4 years tried to block rooftop solar is now sitting on the GNCICB.
Who is this?
Rohan Seneviratne, Presidential Advisor on Energy.
Having said that one, at least now Rohan is singing a different tune. At the ministry, he came up with a 2-year and 4-year plan, which I was very glad. This time and day, talking about a 20-year long-term generation plan in electricity is stupid, to say the least. Because you don't know what is going to happen in 2 years. And we have seen how it has happened.
Technology evolves
so fast. So unfortunately, that's what Mr. Sri Silva is talking about, what was on that basis, base power and all that. So that has changed. Now, to answer your question, what do we do? I'm talking about what do we do now? You see, Johan, if at all that happens, then you have a way to go. Fortunately, this the revolution in solar, particularly rooftop solar, is the one ray of hope, if you would excuse the pun. The ray of sunshine is solar rooftop. Now that is what we try to bring in before this crunch came, starting from April. Unfortunately, they didn't want to give us a tariff. Now let me give you some numbers. Now we were hoping that they'll give us 55 rupees per kilowatt. Supposing we are getting 200 megawatts coming in at them. They offered 37, right? So therefore, if you do that one, the CEB would say, no, we have to pay something like 197 million per year. But what is the alternative?
Oil.
They'll have to run oil, which is at least 120, I think more likely 100. If you pay 120 and paid us the 55 cents, then they would have saved 711 million. So they don't want to pay that 197 million, but ready to pay that.
And you're paying that in rupees in Sri
yes,
Lanka.
exactly.
Not in dollars for oil.
And also, the minister is saying, if you say that one, can we charge people 55 rupees? Because he thinks a 0.073 increase by that, say, about 100 megawatts coming in, is going to change the average from 29 rupees to 55 rupees.
But why do I get the feeling, Mr. Jayasingh, unfortunately, that we don't have the required expertise to decide on the Sri Lanka power generation strategy long term? Even look at the four of you here. It's mixed feelings that are coming out. Isn't that the truth ultimately?
No, but
One should be excused.
Please,
Shami.
No, but again,
thank you very much. Thank you.
again,
Back on my Christmas card.
to answer your question, you are thinking this is such a complex thing.
It is
you know,
not.
using big computer programs and all. That's what they have been doing, and came up with, excuse my word, complete junk. This time, when the long-term generation plan was discussed, I went to the PUCSL. I looked at it. To start with, they did that generation plan using the data of December 2021. How much things changed from 21 December to now? So they are submitting that in July or October, right? So it is fundamentally wrong to use that one. Other thing is they continue to use the arguments like the price of coal will not change, price of LNG will not change. You see, you don't show the graph how it has varied, and from there you draw a single line.
So the
So what
generation
value is that kind of document?
generation plan, which was published in October 2022, assumes that the exchange rate is 201.50 per
Exactly.
US dollar for the whole planning horizon up to 2042. So that's the level of rigor that we have in a generation plan. You know, this price increase, tariff increase we are talking about, right? That what the CB's numbers are built on. An increase of electricity consumption from 2022 to 2023. So I met some of the senior leaders at CB and I asked for a simple question. Can you share the calculation that you have done to get to this increase? There's nothing. Somebody just dreamt up a number and said this is the number, and because of that we are paying this one. And one of you asked a question, if we had doubled our renewable energy, what would have happened? With the demand contraction, because demand is actually contracting, which I showed you earlier, with the demand contraction, if we had doubled our renewable energy, we would need zero tariff increase. That's 2008, almost 2,900 gigawatt hours coming from small renewable energy plants and rooftop solar. Okay, the whole of thermal generation in CEB, the oil power generation that is projected for next year is 5,000.
But Vidura, now you can't just continue to blame the CEB for the plans that they submit, because obviously they are not. There's a regulator.
No,
that's
no, no.
above
They have to be. No, you can't say that.
Regulator can't build.
So sorry.
No, no, no.
Regulator can't do it.
I'm just saying this plan. Okay, the numbers that you dreamt up. Now, all of these matters.
No, that plan has to
will
come
be
from the CEB.
scrutinized. Yes,
No,
the
but
plan has to
that's
come by
come
the
from
CEB. Yes, but then the regulator needs to scrutinize this, right?
Yes.
I mean, I'm on the assumption that tariffs will be increased.
Correct.
So it's not going to be just the fault of one side.
You are 100% right, because according to the Act, what happens is that the CEB is supposed to send the tariff request to the regulator. Regulator has to do their due diligence. They are mandated by the Act to discuss with affected parties. So there's a mandated for stakeholder consultation and pay what is called reasonable costs. Right? So if the tariff request that is coming from CEB is unreasonable, that cannot be paid by law. That's what's
These are
in
the
that.
stakeholders were the invited.
Yeah.
So for the current one,
discussed
the
for the
current
current
one
one,
hasn't.
exactly.
No, so that's the point. The current one hasn't gone through that
No,
process.
exactly.
Because it hasn't come to
It has gone through
PUCSL
the
yet.
process.
Right? Because what I've heard,
Because the cabinet is trying to bypass the PUSL on this matter. So
they
that's the
can't-
feeling that you get when you read the weekend newspapers.
so
a couple of days.
Has that happened before?
no, you can't, because the tariff decisions as per the Act has to come from PUCSL. What I think the theory that they are trying to do is to say, if the cabinet approves, PUCSL is obliged to accept that tariff proposal. But I haven't seen anything in the legislation that gives that level of authority to cabinet, because then why do you have a regulator?
Now, can I read the clause out of the Act? Right? Clause 3(1)(d), the powers and obligations of the PUCSL, right? To regulate tariff and other charges levied by licensees and other electricity undertakings in order to ensure that the most economical and efficient service possible is provided to the consumers, right? Then again, to protect the interests of consumers in relation to the supply of electricity by promoting efficiency, economy and safety by persons engaged in this one. You see? And also to secure the licenses acting efficiently will be able to finance the carrying on activities required. That is what he meant by reasonable cost. Although this is the original Act in Act number 20, 2009, there were 2 revisions, but neither of those revisions changed this one.
Can the PUSL go to courts?
The PUCSL doesn't have to go to courts. What will happen, what's the likely scenario that's going to happen is that Cabinet is going to make a decision. If PUCSL stands strong, they will allow only reasonable costs.
No, but based on the Act, Vidura, if the PUSL goes to courts, the court will make the ruling in favor of the...
PUCSL doesn't have to go to courts because according to the Act, so the minister cannot impose. So even if you look at the draft Cabinet papers that are coming, there are drafts, there's not the final one, it says this tariff should go to PUCSL for approval. So PUCSL has the final say in that. The question is that whether the PUCSL is going to be independent in that approval process or just going to rubber stamp the Cabinet decision. If it's rubber stamping, then it's not an independent regulator.
It's
then
not regulator at all.
the point is this, if Cabinet is going to impose a tariff, the whole purpose of regulator becomes null and void.
No, but now Vidura, technically, we've been speaking about this on many occasions as well. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had individuals in the caliber of Rohan Tatukorala, who said that the private sector can do more. Now, you as a key stakeholder in Sri Lanka's economic growth, you all can put your foot down and say, this is not right, this is not done, this is not just, played by the Act. You all can do that.
So let's see how this pans out. As I say, I come back to the point of whatever is decided, it has to be a competitive tariff, and if it's not a competitive tariff, then we have to question why that is. Why is it that Sri Lanka needs a tariff that is higher than our competitors? So yeah, I mean, that is our opportunity to do that, is through the...
And you all have to do that, and you all have to do that.
And that we will do. That is our right to our businesses and to our employees and to society. That's the role we will.
But it still hasn't come to that stage.
It hasn't come to that stage.
Just one comment, because you were talking about your own electricity bill. While all this is going on, there is an opportunity for us. So to start with, last few months, there were days when we didn't use oil at all, because we had fortunately rain. So if I were in the position of power, I would say, okay, we have proven that we have already reached that 70% renewables here. Let's not allow it to come down. Next year, right, we know the rains are going to cease in January, so there's going to be a drop. But let's bite the bullet and say that we are not going to go back there.
But the problem is, Mr. Jayasinghe, let's be practical. Now, let's say, take me for an example.
No, I'll tell you the practical solution. Okay,
that's a good question, Shamira. Why don't you have rooftop solar?
No, that's what I'm saying. Look at the interest rates.
So that's because you, like everybody, like in CEB, waited.
Yeah, and the interest rate, why is that? Because we are spending $6.5 million to import oil. That is what crashed the rupee.
So, but that has to come through the government. If the government says rooftop solar will be at 6%, let people start getting rooftop solar. That's the way forward.
I'll answer that.
Maybe 9% or not at 33%.
But I thought you wanted consumers to be more proactive. Aren't you contradicting
let me
yourself?
answer that one. ADB gave us a loan of $50 billion at 4% interest. In fact, that amount was $300 million. Some interested parties blocked it and reduced it to 20% because of the IMA deal and all that. The ADB is still willing to give that. Right? But then all this is getting dragged on and all. But having said that one, you see, again that I come back to this wheeling thing, but even before going for wheeling, it's worthwhile for you to do this one, even at 30% this thing, because your average, if you are consuming 400 units, your average now is 65 rupees.
Thank you. Let's leave me out of the equation.
Thank you very much. To mention your electricity bill now.
It was like 2 weeks ago, they were trying to put the pin on me on the tax.
I'm using you as an example.
I think Mr. De Silva has...
Yeah, very quickly, Mr. De Silva.
Now, if we go for 70% renewable, what about the other 30%?
We already have coal.
So we have to go for...
No, what we have.
No. We have to go for... No, I'm talking about source for energy. right? You say renewable, so
Yes.
this is fossil, right?
Yes,
You have to
yes,
go for
yes.
fossil.
Right.
So that's what I've been telling you all the time, because we have to go for energy mix. That is
Yes.
the energy security. We cannot depend on renewable 100%.
So
We have to have energy mix.
No one is saying that we can rely on.
We have not spoken about
We are saying,
100%.
but I think what the
Anyway.
panelists are saying is that we have enough of fossil fuels in the mix.
At
We
the-
need
at
to
the
add a
moment.
little bit more
More renewable.
Not a little bit more, lot more renewables.
Right, okay. So we leave it at that as far as today's conversation is concerned. Thank you very much, Johan Lawrence, Secretary General of the Joint Apparel Association Forum. I think, Johan, as an organization, you all can do a little bit more to be an important stakeholder in these discussions and press the government to take the right decision, because you all contribute immensely towards the country's economy in terms of foreign exchange as well as growth. Thank you very much, Dr. Vidura Ranapanava, energy expert, for joining us this evening. Vidura has been extremely vocal on these subjects since 2015, where Face the Nation started off. We've heard Vidura's thoughts on coal energy, and it was one of the campaigns that was done against coal on the Sampur power plant. We were able to unitedly make sure that we were not again able to install another coal power plant in the country. So thank you very much, Dr. Vidura, for your thoughts and your expertise. Thank you very much, Mr. De Silva, Nimal De Silva, energy expert. You've come on Face the Nation before as well. Thank you very much for sharing your opinion and thoughts. It's very important to have a constructive engagement moving forward. And thank you very much, Mr. Parakram Jayasinghe, the former president of the Bioenergy Association of Sri Lanka. I recollect we met last year when the LNG, the Subadanavi matter came up to play. So Mr. Parakram Jayasinghe has been very vocal on these subjects throughout the time. So the good news is all four of you would join hands and leave the premises today without having any differing opinions, like like the politicians in power. Thank you very much, Shania. Thank you very much, Shalan. Thanks a lot, Sandro, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. The issue that begs an answer is the fact that why must we, the people, pay the price of the incompetency of politicians and bureaucrats? That's the question that begs an answer. And I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. Focus on all four of your net worth factors. Increase your income, increase your savings, increase your investment returns, and decrease your cost of living by simplifying your lifestyle. So some food for thought as far as Face the Nation is concerned tonight. Take care and good night.
ගෝතමී ගමටම පවුල් 200ක් 300ක් විතර ජීවත් වෙන වතුර ටැංකියක් දීලා තියෙනවා. ඒ ගැන ගොඩක් ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම කිසිම දෙයක් නැති වෙලාවෙ ඇවිල්ලා ගම්මැද්දෙන් ඇවිල්ලා බඩු පාසලයක් හරි දීලා දරුවෙක්ට කන්න පිටි එකක් හරි දීලා උදව් කරපේ ඒ ගැන ගොඩක් සතුටු වෙනවා. ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා.
ගම්මැද්ද රට නගන